Yes, yes, yes. I'm going to call this meeting to order. We have a quorum, but just barely. We're waiting for Councilman Clare and Councilman Romack. We're not sure if Vice Mayor is going to be able to make it or not. So, but we have 4, so we're going to go ahead and get started so that we've got a number of things to go through.
Ron just signed in.
Ron just signed this. We got Ron, so we got 5. So if you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Anyone speaking?
What's that? Did you have a comment, Mr. City Manager? I guess not. We need to unmute everybody. Can you unmute everybody all at one time or not?
The host, you can, yeah.
Over here?
Up on the top. It should say unmute all.
Nope, doesn't say that.
It looks like everybody's unmuted except for Tom.
Yeah, unmute.
Okay.
Okay. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the Republic which stands, one nation, for all.
Justice for all.
Okay. So we have this meeting, the budget special.
I'm not hearing the mayor. Is anyone else?
No, I can't hear anybody.
I can't hear him.
So,
Okay. How about now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? All right. So we'll call this meeting to order for the budget for consideration of the budget and a work study session on before we adopt the budget for next year. Excuse me. But an admonition to council, just so we all understand kind of some of the framework or the ground rules that happen within the council. As we have discussed in the past, our job is to set policy and to make direction to the city manager and the city clerk, both of whom report to us. And it's their job then to implement that policy as it applies to staff that work for them. So as we go through this budget, we're going to be setting overall policies in terms of how the staff is going to be expected to manage through this issue going forward. But we're not going to be talking about individual staffing levels or individual work assignments for staff. Staff will come up certainly as we talk about some of the line items that are in these overall budgets. But this is not a forum for discussing specific personnel issues in any way. To the extent that that we would ever do that, it would have to go through a whole process that is properly noticed, and individual personnel may very well have rights that, in terms of rights for notice before we would even make those kind of conversations. And again, in most cases, those conversations are not appropriate at the council level. Those are things that are dealt with by the city manager or the city clerk. So are there any questions about that? I know it can be a little confusing sometimes because obviously we are working on a budget, but it does not involve any decisions on specific staffing levels other than an authorization as part of the budget for the overall staffing level of the city in terms of permanent positions. So are there any questions about that or anything that we need to talk about before we get into the specifics with Lars?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so then let's start with Lars. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Can everyone hear me? Excellent. I saw a few nods. So what I have planned for this evening is we'll do a bit of follow-up first from the last workshop, some questions and some issues that came up. Staff has prepared some things, and then we'll finish the budget by going through the 5-year financial forecast as well as the capital budget, 5-year capital plan. So first off, I have some good news. I was able to pull the reporting for the March transactions in the businesses in Litchfield Park. And this report is not complete yet because the reporting is not complete from Department of Revenue, but it's a good sign in that you can see retail is up 41% over a year ago, April. That made up for all of the losses that we saw in the restaurant and the other category, which other includes hotel, bed tax, amusement, use tax, a bunch of other categories. But that put us basically at a 5% increase over last year without considering construction sales tax. So that's a plus. I wanted to share that. And again, these numbers will change as we get the final reports from Department of Revenue, and then I'll provide these final numbers to council through the regular monthly finance report. Just wanted to point out, this is the slide I showed you from last week, and I underlined in red April, which I was showing at 420, so that was obviously too conservative in the fact that we're getting $140,000 more dollars for April. Are there any questions on the reporting?
Questions from council?
Yes, Lars.
Is there a question or not?
Mr. Mayor, I
I
have a
don't
question.
see any. Okay, was that Ron, Councilman Clare?
Yes, sir. So
All right.
the previous slide that you showed, Lars, that was for March's revenue, which we projected at 604, but we actually finished at 662.
So I projected actually 420,000 as the estimate.
Okay.
So we finished.
The projections that I thought you showed on the previous slide were for March. They were for April. Okay.
Yeah, I just tried to clarify because the March sales are the sales that occurred in the business for March. So we know that, the COVID closures happened towards the middle or end of March.
Understand.
Those sales then get reported to the Department of Revenue in April. So we show them under the April month.
Got it. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Mr. Mayor, this is Tom.
Any other? Yeah, Councilman Stossy.
Lars, I was just curious if you got it. We talked last time about maybe calling some of these bigger businesses to get a sense for what their April revenues look like. Did you guys get a chance to do that?
We looked into that possibility.
We took that actually to the city attorney because of the issues of their state statute on confidentiality of that information and what we can use the information for. We were advised by the city attorney that we should not go to the businesses and generally make those kinds of inquiries without preparing and getting each business to sign a releasing us from the prohibitions and the admonitions of privacy that are in state statute. Given the time frames, we didn't think that the information we were going to get was going to be all that helpful that would justify the amount of time and expense it would take to go and get everyone to sign those kinds of waivers. So that was not done.
Thank you, Mayor. Should I move on?
Yes. Unless
Okay.
Councilmember Stossy has another comment or a question.
No, sir, I'm good. Thank you.
And again, the reasoning for it, Councilman, was that it would have been a very large project to try to undo the undertaking, and no matter what we're told by these businesses in terms of what their estimates are, the reality is that we're going to have to make adjustments as we see what the actual spending really is. And so that we're not gonna be able to generate information that's gonna give us a whole lot more specificity in terms of trying to really sharpen this budget down to the very last dollar. We're gonna be having to make adjustments as we go through the year and see how this plays out. Because literally no one knows today what this is gonna be like. A good example is how much extra retail sales we ended up with, which is basically Albertsons and Fry's. You know, that retail component jumped so much that it makes up for a lot of issues with the restaurant and bar traffic that is down and is probably going to go down some more. If you look at the estimates that Lars came up with, go to the next slide.
Yes.
Where we have the estimates. The estimates he's got in for May and June, the total are less than what the retail sales were for April. So it's very likely that we're going to see the income coming in being in excess of those amounts. It isn't going to change our budgeting though, but we're probably in a better position than what we have projected, which is probably a healthy way to look at this.
Can I ask a question? Where do the bed tax?
Councilman Brainerd?
Yes. Where does bed tax fall into that, the wigwam? Where do we see their numbers in that?
So I'm reporting under other, a conglomerate of different categories, just because the confidentiality statutes, I can't call them out separately on the report. So they're bunched in the other category.
Okay, so we'll continue with your presentation, Lars.
Okay. And then the next step is there was a revision to the department request from the city clerk's office. I wanted to bring that up here right at the beginning. City clerk has recommended to remove her request for the salary adjustment for her due to the COVID circumstance. And then also, because the general election publicity pamphlet will not be needed, being that it has already been readopted, she's recommended to remove about $6,000 in that category. However, she would like to retain the request for the reclassifications that we discussed last week in the admin assistant 1 category. There's 2 positions, or actually 3 total in her department, and she's looking to reclass 2 of them, one to a deputy city clerk and another to assistant to mayor and city manager. The total impact for that request would be $16,853 over last year. We can talk about that now or later. It's up to pleasure of the council.
I would just have a question, I guess, of the city clerk. If we, right, as I understand it, we're going to change the classification of a current administrative staff person from whatever they are now into a deputy clerk, with the idea of doing training on that clerk for the future. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I'm wondering if the value of the services that are being rendered on the last day that they're an administrative assistant or the first day that they're a deputy clerk really changes. Doesn't it change as we get them training?
It does. With the training they'll receive, they'll become a certified municipal clerk. They'll understand more the objective of the clerk's office, the retention schedules from the state, and also elections. That's the most important one.
And so I'm just wondering if we shouldn't tie changes in compensation to this training and the increase in value of the individual's efforts to the city, as opposed to just looking at it as a change that happens on the first day.
We could do that.
Okay, so if you'd think that through, then again, I don't have a problem with the idea of having succession planning and getting somebody trained so they can, they're behind you, and if there's any kind of an issue that makes your services not available to us. But I just would like to see the adjustments and compensation for people who work for you be tied to their value and a portion of that value is how much training they've had and what they're able to do in terms of their job duties.
Okay.
Any other comments from the council? Okay, then we'll go on to the next topic.
Okay, these are some other follow-up topics that staff wanted to provide more information on based on questions from council last week. The first is the National League of Cities membership. The dues total exactly for last year was $1,150.51. This piece was not provided, and that is the fact that the royalties we received exceeded that dues amount, so it pays for itself in essence. Through the service line warranty program, the city receives revenue based on the number of customers that sign up in Litchfield Park, and so just wanted to provide that information. The next one was the engineering contract discussion. I believe Woody Scouten is available to provide more information on that. Is Woody available?
Okay, sorry, I had to unmute myself. Yes, Mayor and members of the council. So I sat down and looked at in detail what those engineering costs would be for EPS Group, our contract engineering company. And one of the basic, about half of the $100,000 that I had budgeted would be for engineering related to all of the street projects that we have planned. And when we get to the capital improvement plan, you're going to see a lot of street projects. And so I will need help in putting together exhibits and plans that I can give to contractors or go out to bid with, so that we can move forward with getting those over 150 street segments, get some pavement maintenance done on those streets that is desperately needed. So that's about half of it. The other thing we have coming up this year is an application of the flood control district for phase 4 and phase 5 of the storm drain, downtown storm drain project. And we will need some help putting together the CIP application and cost estimates for that. I estimated $10,000 for that. From time to time, we have a need for specialized development plan review services that I'm not an expert in, and that's primarily in the area of traffic engineering. So reviewing plans, reviewing reports for traffic engineering primarily, but may also be structural engineering and things like that. Anyway, I estimated $5,000 for that. And then we'll have a significant amount of construction inspection during the coming year, and that is provided to us through EPS Group. And that's primarily for development projects, but also for the pavement maintenance work and other paving projects that we have coming up. And then I estimated $20,000 for that. And then miscellaneous projects, so there's things that we'll be working on during the year that we don't know about today, and those, most of the time that involves cost estimates and maybe some simple exhibits, other types of coordination. So I estimated $10,000 for that. So that's the balance that I came up with.
Question to Lars. Do we normally take the engineering costs that are on road projects and actually charge those costs into the capital budget?
Yeah, that is correct. If we've identified a specific capital project engineering firms working on, we charge it to the project there.
And so Mayor, if I may, I should have mentioned that the engineering cost that I had estimated at $50,000 is mostly on HERF funded projects. And the concept here is to use general fund money to pay for the engineering, and that makes the HERF money go farther. In other words, we're spending HERF money on asphalt and pavement on the ground as opposed to engineering services. But we can do it either way.
Yeah, I understand. I know you've gone through the capital budget and made some adjustments to utilize HERF funds. So maybe we should just talk about that issue when we get to the HERF monies.
Okay.
Any other questions on Mr. Scouten about the engineering budget? Here's another comment. One of the things that's going to happen over this next year will be additional work that has to be done on the development to the south of Luke Air Force's runway on Camelback. The cross-dock facility zoning matter has been continued indefinitely with the direction from the County Board of Supervisors that the applicant work with the cities to try to resolve the issues that are involved with the cross-dock facility. At the same time, the property that is just to the west of the cross-dock facility proposal is the racetrack, and the property just to the west of the racetrack has been sold, and the new owner is asking the city of Glendale to annex it in with the idea of developing it as some sort of industrial project. So there will be potentially additional zoning type issues that will have engineering component coming up with that property as well in the next year. One of the things that we may have to do is take a look at traffic studies. We may have to actually obtain some traffic studies, and we may want to look at environmental impacts from the increased truck traffic that could be generated by these facilities to make sure that we're taking the steps that are necessary to protect our residents. So we want to make sure that our engineering, within the engineering department, that you have a contingency fund set up so that we have funds available assuming we have the funds, that we have the budget capacity to deal with these issues as they come up for the zoning questions that are going to relate to that land. That's my comment. Does there anybody else have a comment on engineering or this area? All right, let's continue, Lars.
Thank you, Mayor. The second one was if Bill would like to provide more information about the public works employee requests, that's on this next bullet point. Bill, City Manager, would you like to have any comments on that?
Sure. So last week I mentioned those 2 additional positions came out of the fact that we accepted and had built the Little League Baseball Park. Prior to that, we had 0 maintenance people working on the Little League Baseball Park. They were working on a schedule that caused the crews to rotate through the city doing other projects that need to be done, weeds, parks, some other things. Well, now that we have the baseball park, we now have a maintenance requirement there to keep the lawn mowed and the weeds down and the plumbing fixed and all that. That was one issue for needing another body. The other issue was that with the oncoming potential build of the museum, we're being asked as a city to maintain the rest of the hill in a better condition than it has been maintained in the past. Because it hasn't been used before. Now that it'll start having more public traffic, we've been asked if we can maintain that and work on getting it groomed up so that it looks nice in some kind of capacity. And we've taken in a lot of input to include desert landscaping, but still that requires a regular maintenance process to make sure that everything is looking good. And then finally, in the past, Brian had provided maintenance to some of our vehicles and a lot of our equipment, because he was a certified mechanic in the past, and Brian Goodman. And he's gone, and we don't have anyone on staff in Public Works or at all that can do that kind of maintenance. We can either one, send that out for work. Of course, if we do, then we have downtime for the equipment and probably more expense because we'll be paying outside costs. If we bring on a staff member that can do both, be part of the crews to do maintenance, and then when needed, breaks away and does maintenance on equipment, then we'll have an in-house capability, which we no longer have. So those are the two positions that we have, and we're also currently down one position. We have an individual that took a job with APS, so we have an open position as well. And the way the staff works right now in Public Works is they have a list of projects, if you will, to work on, and it's a rotationary basis. In other words, it's linear, where they go from one project for X number of days, then to the next one and the next one, and so on. When they get to the end, they come back and start all over again. If we insert anything new, then either we need more manpower, or we simply extend the length of time between projects. And so areas might get a little weedy or look a little rough, but that's kind of the gist of it. And so that's really kind of my comments. I do have a breakout on how the crews work, but I don't think that's relevant at this point to the conversation, or it's too detailed, actually. That's my comment. Thank you.
Questions for the city manager on these two full-time Public Works employees? What we had discussed in the past was it makes sense for us to authorize in general these positions because they do seem justified as a general matter. But then we need to watch to see what happens over the next month or two as we get ready to start fill them. Obviously, the one that involves maintenance is pay me now or pay me later. So whether we have the spot or we don't have the spot, we're going to spend the money. So it probably makes sense to get that done right away. The other one is, it makes sense so long as our budget holds up, at some reasonable level, so that we're not depleting our savings resources at too fast a pace. So if there are any other comments, then continue, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. And this last bullet point on this slide, I'm going to hand over to Matthew Williams to discuss. This was brought up by the Vice Mayor last time about what the fixed costs to operate the pool were, and Matthew came up with some information to provide.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mayor and Council, as you will see on the slide, if the pool is closed, it would cost $13,685 a month to maintain. Again, that does include staff, utilities, and chemicals, or $41,000 for 3 months. On the other side, if we open, it'll be $27,148 a month, or $81,000 for the 3-month season. We are currently planning for this summer to be open swim and water aerobics only. We are not planning to do Legardos, our competitive swim league. We are not planning to do swim lessons either for the kids because with COVID-19, we don't think we can safely. But we are looking to offer some programs. As far as the revenue side goes, there's so many X factors that go into it there because we don't know how many people will be coming. We don't know what social distance requirements for the pool will be featured. But we figured the revenue, based off 50% of last year's numbers, would be about $3,000 a month. So, of course, it will not recover it. As you see, that at $3,000 a month, that's a little over 10% of the cost if it's open. But that's roughly where we would be. But again, there's so many X factors there that will play into that. I was asked the question last time as far as what's the minimum amount of time the pool can open, and I would say at least 2 months. Our aquatics director feels that at less than 2 months, it would be very hard to retain lifeguards because at less than 2 months, they'll probably go and find other jobs because they are younger employees. Of course, it's part-time work, and that would be a concern. We have made plans now where we can open June 1, June 15th, or July 1. It all depends what happens. As you know, per the governor's orders, commercial pools are currently closed. I do know the the governor said last week that he'll be making an announcement soon on pools and gyms. So hopefully the pool can open in early June. But again, we're just in a holding pattern waiting to see. But again, that's my numbers on the pool. Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to see, I thought you were done.
Okay. But that's the basic gist of it. If it's closed, it's $13,000 a month. Or if it's open, it's $27 a month. That's about a $14,000 difference between open and closed per month. And the final point, our expenditures are expected to come in about $80,000 under budget for the current fiscal year. There's a lot of reasons for that. One, obviously, we're trying to be conservative the best we can, but also it costs money to provide swim lessons. It costs money to provide Legardos. These things cost money. If we have less activities, we have less lifeguards, which saves us money in the long run. So, but however, we would hope to return to a full normal activity season next spring. That would be spring 2021. Any questions?
I wonder if it would make sense, given the difference in cost to the city, if this was a decision that was made once we understand what the governor's going to come out with, in terms of, and so we know the timing of it, then we can sit and we can budget for the potential to have the pool open, but then when you want to make the decision to implement that budget, that you come back to the council and we talk about the impact on the budget and where things actually are after another month or 2 months.
Yes, sir. I think that would make good sense. Hopefully we can open the pool June 1. Of course, we'll see.
Okay, any other comments from council? Okay, I don't see any. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll continue. So this is the last section of our budget. Wanted to briefly talk about the 5-year financial forecast and the 5-year CIP that staff has put together. As far as the forecast goes, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time here because the assumptions are assumptions and no one can really predict the future, especially now with the uncertainty. However, just so we understand the numbers behind it, I'm projecting that the residential developments would be completed. That means the larger residential developments, there may still be infill after that, but completed the next fiscal year. I'm budgeting in the forecast, I shouldn't say budget, I'm projecting in the forecast the Camelback and Dysart users that we know about are coming on board, and then basically a full development of the city center over the next 5 years. And then as far as the revenue goes, it'd be next year a 0% change in sales tax, and then every year after that up 3%. Just so council is aware of kind of the last recession, what happened to our sales tax. I think I touched on this last time too, but in fiscal 2008, we had a 25% decrease. And then it jumped to 7%, back down 2%, and then up again. That's compared to one of our shopping centers as a whole. Didn't decrease quite as much as the overall citywide. And I think having two kind of large shopping centers in the city is definitely going to help as we weather this with basically general merchandise being still high demand. The key takeaways of the forecast, we can get into the details if you'd like, but with those assumptions, the operating revenues remain to cover the operating expenditures over that 5-year period. I included potential sale and lease of property in the city center. With that, there's about $19.3 million in the general fund to pay for capital. However, the capital plan is substantial in that, again, these are modeling assumptions, but model predicts that we still would need additional funding to pay for the capital if we would like to maintain our 6 months of reserve. with that, I'll briefly talk about overall the capital plan, and then we'll jump into the detail. The plan developed last year for 5 years was 10.5 million. This year's plan increased quite a bit to a total of 28.1 million, and that's mainly a result of the city center projects have been added into the capital plan, totaling 16.7 million. The plan is not currently funded in total, as I mentioned in the last slide, based on the forecast. Additional funds may have to be raised if the forecast is right. With that, I will jump into the actual document for the capital plan. So here's the list of projects. I'm trying to get this to show. Hopefully council and other attendees can see this slide. But here's the 5-year plan that we've come up with. It's on page 12 of your packet if you need that. And as I mentioned, there's 28.1 million in the 5-year plan. Next year's budget, currently as it sits, there was a $6 million project for the Village Parkway extension. That's the GMP2 as referred to by our city engineer. Not exactly sure how we would like to get into this information. Mayor, do you have any suggestions to get council's feedback on this plan?
Well, council's, you've had an opportunity to have the plan, and these, for the most part, these are projects that have been discussed over the years. We have not made any commitments or not really done a whole lot of design, so we don't know exactly what this number one is in terms of the Village Parkway extension. Its timing, obviously, is very much in doubt at this point, since we don't know how much impact this COVID-19 is going to have on our budget for the next 6 or 8 months, even a year. And we don't know what impact it'll have, other than it's almost assuredly going to slow down the process of selling the land and getting a developer interested in doing something in this downtown area. So that project is one that I think is, at this point, certainly $6 million is way outside what we probably will be looking at trying to spend even in the next year or 2 years. But we might, so we're going to need more detail on that kind of expenditure in terms of before we can even get put into this plan, in terms of what the timing of it might be. So that's something to be revisited in the future, and at best would be put in as a contingency. The rest of these are projects that I think everybody will be familiar with. We've got the perimeter wall reconstruction program. We moved it out to fiscal year 22 and 24. The 22 is the project that we've been trying to get started for several years along Litchfield Road between the canal and the underpass and Bird Lane. And then the next section, I assume that next section is over along Dysart, but I don't know that for a fact. We have the issue of potentially moving there's a little short wall around the Camelback Park at Dysart and Camelback. If we move the fence, then we can put in a parking lot, which would resolve some of the issues of parking along Villanueva. That's pretty dangerous now when the park is in high use. So that, I don't know if that's that 400,000 or not, but we still have sections of the wall that we need to work on. Road maintenance is road maintenance. We know that. Dysart and Indian School, we have a long-standing problem at that intersection that needs to be fixed on the east side where the gas station is and McDonald's, that portion of the intersection is messed up and it needs to be reconstructed. And then there's a variety of other things that, again, we have had discussions of in the past. I don't know that these are necessarily in exactly the order of priority that we would all agree on, but they're probably not way off. So these are all topics that I think we're going to have to go through and spend some time. Once we see what happens to our revenues, we need to spend some time talking about which ones of these we might want to implement in the next year or 2 years, based upon what our revenue situation looks like, and based upon what interest we can generate on the city center land. Comments from the council? Everyone's quiet. We need the vice mayor. Where's the vice mayor?
Can I ask a quick clarification?
Sure.
Can you
Councilor
tell me
Watson.
what the public, you probably went over and I missed it, public improvements reimbursement for Camelback and Dysart is?
Yes, I can answer that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I know what it is, but I'll let Lars do it.
Okay, so this.
Go ahead.
Thank you. This is basically, it's a development agreement that the city entered into with the Southwest NEC. I can't remember exact developer's name, but it's the development that's happening at the corner of Camelback and Dysart. So the city has agreed to reimburse the developer up to $350,000. So this is a carryover from FY20. We've already issued a payment towards that. It's up to $350,000 for the off-site improvements that they've done in that.
It's
development.
based on, I think it's 50% of the tax revenues generated by the project.
Correct.
And the first 150 has already gone out.
Mayor, that also
Any
like
other
to quickly add that the city engineer Woody Scouten is prepared to answer any detailed questions on these projects, as well as he's done a review of these projects to see what would qualify for HERF funding, and he could also expound on that as well.
Actually,
As I understand it, as I understand it, staff is working on a plan to try to fund as much of this CIP budget with HERF as possible. And that would be, I think, is a topic that we don't necessarily have to deal with that today as part of this budget, but it's something you'll want to bring to the council in another work session that's just devoted to a discussion of expenditure of HERF, of our HERF reserves. Councilman Donahue.
actually, that's just what I was going to ask, is which ones would be prioritized for HERF, but we can talk about that another time.
Yeah, there has been work done on that, and there's a little bit more than $1 million worth of projects that are in this list that could be paid for with HERF that we can go ahead and get done. Get done some this year yet, and then in the next year it'll fund a good bit of these programs.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Clare.
would it make sense with limited activity going on in certain areas to maybe reprioritize some of these smaller things that aren't being used right now to go ahead and get those things done, since there's limited activity and they wouldn't be holding anybody back from using some of the facilities, the walls. So instead of maybe dragging them out, going ahead and utilizing that now where there's low interest.
That may be an appropriate thing to do for some of these items. Unfortunately, the trouble with the speed of government is that if we were to decide today to do, I'll just give you an example. Let's remodel the lobby. By the time that we were actually able to remodel the lobby, the COVID-19 will not be a crisis anymore. So it's not that we're not going to get it done. It's just that it's not something we can really, if we could do it tomorrow, it'd be great because the lobby's closed, and so it would be the perfect time to do it. But it just takes so long to get this stuff through the governmental steps that, you know, I don't know if we can get it done quick enough that it's really going to make a difference. You know, it doesn't mean that we don't want to do it. I think we need to sit down and look at it and decide when we want to do it, and you know, just authorize staff to go start getting it done.
Can I ask a question?
Yes. Councilman Watson.
Kind of along the same lines as to what he was just saying, but thinking the other direction, you know, the lobby remodeling was the one that I was looking at. Can we put that off for a year, as we're not going to have the kind of foot traffic through there that we would have had if we were fully opened and operational all summer long?
And I think that's exactly the kind of conversation or discussion we have to have. Right now, what we need to do is establish our overall budget so that we have the cap on what we can spend. And then as we go forward over the next, 6 or 8 or 10 weeks, we get a better idea of what's our budget really going to look like. Then we need to come into this list and prioritize what we want to spend and when we want to spend it. And we'll have a meeting that just is devoted to capital improvement projects and presentations about which ones are most merited, which ones fit in our budget the best, and make those decisions. At this point, what we need to do is get an overall budget established that we can, meet the budgetary guidelines in state law, and then we'll come back to these specific priority areas, realizing that none of these items are going to be done until the council approves them, because for the most part, they're larger than what the staff could authorize on their own. So it would have to come to council and be discussed before they're authorized to actually be done. Is that okay? Okay, any other comments or questions? So in the budget presentation that you're putting together for us, Lars, there is a contingency for CIP projects so that we can come back and do this depending upon how things actually shake out. The answer is, you're going to show us.
Sorry, yeah. So the budget as has been prepared does include $1,000 of city center contingency. Based on your comments, Mayor, I'm wondering if you would prefer that $6 million capital project be moved to the contingency line.
At this point, it certainly is a contingency because we don't know what we're going to do and we don't know when we're going to do it. So it's a total swag at this point of a project that hasn't even been defined yet. But I don't know if realistically, does it really make a difference how it's presented on this?
It really, to answer that question, it really doesn't. It's more, what would happen is either way, council is going to have to approve it. But when council approves a capital project of that size to be spent, they would also have to approve moving appropriation to the capital to get it done, if we were to move it to the city center contingency. So it's mainly a, I guess, technicality. It really doesn't make a difference.
Doesn't really make any difference. Yeah. So I don't necessarily care where, the current capital budget of $9.2 million is one that isn't going to get spent until we go through it and authorize it. So it's fine with me the way it is, or it would be fine if you want to put it, take $6 million of it and put it in that city center contingency, because, we don't know what that is and we don't know its timing. That we haven't gone through any of it yet.
Okay, thanks.
Questions or comments from the council? So can you bring up that overall budget again so we can understand what's going to be brought to council for as we go through these steps? So on May 20th, you're going to bring us.
Okay. Thank you. So May 20th, we're bringing the tentative budget adoption to council. that's the maximum amount that you'd like us to authorize. It also specifies by fund and department, so it is detailed. Then the June 17th is the actual final adoption of the budget. These are both at your regular council meetings. And then in the regular meeting in July would be adoption of the tax levies.
So other than the changes that we had talked about when we first started the meeting, have we gone through any of these department budgets to try to get them to reflect current level spending with increases in things like merit pay or cost of living and stuff like that put into contingency?
Basically,
well, what you bring to us on the 20th, basically when you bring it to us on the 20th, do you need that level of detail to be accounted for, or is this just a top number for each department level?
Basically, we would like council's direction at this point because there is an opportunity to revise the budget between the tentative and final. However, if there's any direction now, it would be good so we can work it into the detail. It does, like, the budget that council adopts is by a department total, by fund. However, moving some of that budget that's in the department area and putting it into contingency would be better to do at this point, in my opinion.
Would you do it as a contingency by department or an overall contingency?
It would be an overall.
And then we would just move it as we needed to move it as of something the council has approved?
Correct.
Okay. Any comments from on the council from adopting that approach?
I like it, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Ostosi.
I just was saying that I like the approach.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Clare, did you have a comment?
I just had a quick question. Some of the bigger increases that we talked about last meeting was with MCSO and Goodyear Fire. Are those long-term contracts with increases built in? Are these negotiated every year? I'm trying to just make sure that I understand what's happening there.
You have two different situations. With MCSO, we have a contract that can be terminated or renegotiated once a year. There's a window for doing that, and I think that window is, I don't know, March or April maybe. City manager can give you a specific date, but it's once a year we have the ability to go in and adjust that contract. And then it goes for another year, so every year we can look at it. The contract with Goodyear is a multi-year contract that I'm not sure, I'm going to guess it's halfway through its term. And so it has adjustments that are built into it based upon increases that Goodyear has in running that station, I think it's 183, but the station right by the Goodyear Park. And that includes mainly personnel costs is what we've seen our major increases would be related to. And those, so you've got increases in direct pay and then also substantial increases in the cost of their pension system, the PSPRS.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, this is
Any other
Bill.
questions? Go ahead, Mr. City Manager.
Just real quick, the date we have to negotiate the MCSO contract by is April 15th.
One of the things that we need to schedule some time to talk about, obviously we can't make a change in it necessarily until next April or next March, but we should schedule time going forward to have the general conversation that different councilmen have raised in the past of whether we want to change to somebody different than MCSO. And I think you've gotten some proposals, and we ought to take a look at some of those cost proposals so that council understands what we're spending and how MCSO stacks up with the other proposals you received. And then a discussion of the number of beats and how much of our overall budget should be devoted to policing the park. So that would be a good topic that we put on a work study session after we get through this budget issues and those kinds of things. So maybe in July or August, we devote a work study to discussing that whole public safety issue. Any other comments or questions from council? Okay, Lars, do we have anything else we need to give you direction on so you can get this budget prepared to bring to us?
I would just like to clarify, based on feedback, it sounds like, let me just jump back to a couple slides. So there's two, I guess, options on the table. One is, we move forward with the budget as been prepared by the departments, which means we have a 5% increase with all of these items in each department. The second option would be we take those items that are listed here, these increases, and move them into the contingency line. Doing so would basically require, before we move forward on merit, before we move forward on COLA, before we move forward on hiring 2 public works employees, for example, that would require specific authorization from council to move that budget appropriation. So those are the two kind of, well, there may be more options, but those are 2 options that I've presented. And then it sounded like there was more leaning towards this option currently on the screen. Is that correct?
I would say generally that's the option that I favor. The only exception to that is when it comes to the public works area, I'm not opposed to budgeting for adding a maintenance tech in the public works area, because I think it is a pay me now or pay me later kind of a question, and it would be better if we were doing that maintenance in-house as opposed to trying to do it outside, because I think we could make sure that we scheduled that maintenance and did a better job of keeping the equipment in good shape. When it comes to adding personnel, whether it's in, that if it's a non-essential position, then I think it makes sense while we're in these times of budget uncertainty for staff to come back and show us what's the difference. So in the case of the public works, if there's a certain number of hours it takes to get through all the public works process, and if that process today is a 6-week process, that means that if we do this park today, we can't come back to it for 6 weeks. The council has a policy decision to make on whether that's acceptable. And if it isn't acceptable, then we add a person. Then what's the rotation become? So instead of 6 weeks, does it become 5 weeks or 4 weeks? That policy issue is one I think the council needs to be involved in while we're in a time of budgeting uncertainty. So the answer to your question is, from my standpoint at least, the ones where we've got decisions that can be made in the future, that we should look at those from a policy standpoint, we should look at them as we understand our revenues and as staff goes through and explains what the trade-offs are. Comments from the council? I don't see any green arrows, so does that give you enough information specifically on these items, or do we need to go through each of them and talk about each item individually? So of the first 3, I would say add one full-time public works employee for maintenance tech, and put the other one in contingency. For cost of living and merit, I think that goes into contingency. We've already made adjustments to what the city clerk has requested, and so that's just going to change. The Loma Homestead maintenance increase, I think, has to go into contingency. Public works maintenance cost increases. Again, I'm not sure exactly what those things are. I'm assuming that those are things that we can make policy decisions on based on staff input once we know more about our actual budget. Is that correct or not?
That's correct. We can, keep the proposed budget, as an option we can come back to council with in the future if needed.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, so, Mr. City Manager.
So in the public works maintenance cost increases where it says includes equipment repair and replacement, utilities, supplies and services, that's not manpower. That's being able to buy parts and pieces to fix the equipment. So if I have a maintenance tech, he has to replace a part. That's what that would be, is to be able to buy that part so that he can fix the machine. And of course,
So that's probably not it's probably not a contingency item. It shouldn't have been yellowed in the first place.
that's what I'm thinking, unless Lars has some information, I don't.
Thank you. Just briefly, the reason that's highlighted is because it's made up of a ton of line items that are increasing. So my opinion is it's discretionary, right? You can keep the budget as last year's, or we could increase it.
I guess what I would say is I would direct you and the city manager to go through those line items and see which one really are things that we need to budget, because we know that expense is going to be there, and which items are things that could be put into a contingency, and we will decide on them as we go forward.
We can do that.
Is the council happy with that direction? Any comments? I think that's a thumbs up from Councilman Stossy. Oh, and Councilman Clare, all right. Okay, Lars, what else do you need?
Well, that's it. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to give one more opportunity for Bill to chime in if he feels like, do you have enough direction for the budget?
Yeah, I believe we have enough direction to talk about some of these things. Staff's been assigned some direction to look at some things that we can break out, but I think we have enough information to go ahead and put a final budget together. Just a reminder to council, when we meet again for the tentative budget adoption, you also have opportunity at that point to discuss, again, if you'd like, any of the issues or items within the budget. And if we need to, at that point, based on additional information we may have by then, we can make additional changes at that time, or you may adopt tentatively the budget as it is presented at that time and that date in May at the council meeting. Thank you.
All right, if are there any other comments from council? Otherwise, Councilman Donahue.
I just want to say thank you to Lars. This has just been awesome. I really appreciate it, especially in this setting. You did a great job, so thank you. And when it comes from me, trust me, it's a good one, because these numbers are, but I understood it and it was really well done.
Thank you for the feedback. Appreciate it.
I second that.
All right, anything else from council? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion to adjourn,
Yes.
but I also wanted to add a comment that I really appreciate the splash of color in Ann's background.
Oh, thank you. Feng shui.
Claire, it helps us in an otherwise drab environment.
I can
Okay,
go
is there
around.
a second to the motion? Is there a second to the motion to adjourn?
I second.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Come on,
Aye.
ayes. We gotta have, all right. Councilman Clare, you got an aye? Yeah, you're muted. All right, I think that's everybody. Thank you again for taking time out of your day on a special day to do this budget. I'm sure it's not the most exciting thing you'd like to do. Go and enjoy dinner and your family. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.